Hey there, and welcome back to part 2 of this router table build, where today I'll show you how I built this router table cabinet. If you haven't already seen part 1 in which I built the tabletop, be sure to check that out first. Like most projects, this one started off at the lumber store. Since I can't fit a full sheet of plywood into my car, I had mine cut down to more manageable sizes at the store, then finished making the cuts in the shop. If you're interested, you'll find the detailed measurements as well as a cut list on my website. I'll leave a link in the description below. Once all my pieces were cut, the first thing I did was cut out a hole in the back panel where I'll attach a 4-inch port for dust collection. I knew I wanted it 12 inches down from the top and centered across the back. After tracing it out, I also traced out the inside of the port, then used my jigsaw to cut away the inner piece and make the hole. I'm not going to attach the port just yet, but we'll get to that a little later. Next, I moved on to assembling the cabinet frame. I started by making all the pocket holes I would need to make the assembly easier. With all the pocket holes made, I moved on to assembly. I first connected the back to the side panels using 1 1/4 pocket screws and attached both sides. I then added in the middle divider and used some spring clamps to help hold it up against some reference lines I had drawn 12 inches down from the top. To finish off, I slipped the bottom piece underneath, lined it all up, and screwed all 3 sides down to the bottom using some more pocket screws. I wanted to add in 2 drawers in the bottom section, so I started by measuring the width of the opening, then subtracted 1 inch to account for the width of the drawer slides I'm using. To assemble the drawers, I first applied some glue to the seams, then used some brad nails to help hold the sides into place while I screwed in some pocket screws. I then applied some glue all along the bottom and dropped in the bottom panel that I secured with brad nails. This was my first time working with drawer slides, but the process is pretty simple. For the bottom one, you'll want to use a small spacer to raise the drawer up a bit, then set the drawer slide an 1/8 of an inch back. Holding it firmly in place, just pull the slide out and find the screw holes to secure it to the cabinet. Next, you can pull the drawer out just a bit, along with the bottom spacer, and attach the sides to the drawer. Then work your way back to the following screws. For the upper drawer, I used my Craig drawer slide jig, which made the job easy. Next, I moved on to the drawer faces. I lined up all the sides, then clamped the face to the drawer box securely. I used a countersink bit to drill some holes in from the back, then added some screws to secure the face to the drawers. I repeated the same process for the upper drawer, but used washers as a spacer between both drawers. At this point, I decided it was time to add the casters and move this build down to the floor. Oh, and by the way, this is why I didn't attach the dust port to the back just yet. I made some pilot holes and attached the casters using these lag screws because they're strong, but also because they have a hex head that's big enough so it won't slip through the holes. At this point, I probably should have gotten some help, or at least taken the drawers out. In any case, I got the cabinet down to the floor in one piece and without injury. Okay, now's a good time to attach the dust port. I used some Wellbond glue to create a seal, then secured it with some screws. For the top part of the cabinet, I wanted to add small jars, but decided to go with simple wooden slides that I nailed into place with my brad nailer. I repeated the same pattern on a second panel, then checked to make sure my drawer bottoms would fit before securing the panel into place with some pocket screws. I then repeated the same thing on the other side of the cabinet. The top middle section is going to be a door so I can easily access my router from underneath if I have to. I used a hinge jig to mark out 3 pilot holes, then used the 35mm Forstner bit to countersink the hinges. I loosely attached the fasteners to the cabinet, leaving some wiggle room. Again, using washers as a spacer, I mounted the door, then fully tightened the screws, and then made some final adjustments. Okay, back to my top drawers. I added these blocks as faux fronts, which are basically just so I'll have something to attach the drawer fronts to. Using my trusty washers to get the spacing just right, both on the bottom and on the side, I clamped on the face, drilled some countersunk holes, and secured the face with some screws. And then simply repeated for all 6 drawers. To attach the knobs, I used this Craig drawer pull jig to help place the knobs consistently. I'm not sure what I'll use all my upper drawers for yet, but I decided to fit one of them with a router bit holder that I made out of a 2x8 by drilling a bunch of 1/4-inch holes into it, since all of my drill bits have 1/4-inch shanks. I didn't want to make this too permanent yet, so I just held it into place with some brad nails. For another drawer, I decided to make a simple box where I'll be able to store some of the main tools I'll use for this table, like the lift handle and wrenches. Again, not being fully committed to this just yet, I just nailed it all together for now. In the final stretch now, it's time to attach the tabletop. If you haven't seen part 1 where I show how I built this tabletop, be sure to check that out by either clicking the link in the top right corner or the link in the description below. A router table isn't really complete without an external switch. I'm reusing an old switch that I had on hand, but you can find a wide variety on Amazon. After mounting the switch to the door on the side closest to the hinge, I fed the wires through and realized I was pretty much done with this build. Well, except for one thing. I really wasn't digging my nickel handles, so I decided to paint them all red. So let me give you a quick tour. Here's where I keep my push pads, and these ones are the Grabbers by Milescraft. And then under here I have some of my router bits with plenty of room for more. Over here we have the router lift handle to raise and lower the bit, as well as my various router wrenches. I've also left some drawers free for now until I figure out what to use them for. On the bottom, I've got all my Milescraft feather boards and a place to store my Craig jigs. And then on the very bottom, I can store my routers and other handheld tools. So that's it for this video, but stay tuned for part 3 where we'll take a closer look and test out the dust collection, as well as finally see this table in action. If you like this video, please hit that thumbs up button, and until next time, thanks for watching.